People sometimes ask me what Jesus did during those 40 days after he was raised from the dead before he was ascended into heaven. My simple answer is, he needed time to raise his disciples back from the dead. Something about the disciples had died too after their leader and master was crucified. You know the stories in the Gospels about the apparitions of the resurrected Jesus to his disciples have a common pattern. He is restoring them. Two of them had fallen out and broken away already. They were not traveling to Emmaus. They were escaping. He had to intercept them to reroute their journey back to Jerusalem to reunite them with the community. One of them was not in speaking terms with the rest. I'm of course referring to Thomas. John tells us in a cryptic way, Thomas was not with them when Jesus first appeared in the upper room. He had to touch the wounds of Jesus first before his own wounded relationship with his community could be healed. And remember Mary Magdalene and the other women. They had to struggle with the sexist attitudes of these androcentric, patriarchal male disciples who would not trust their testimony, all because they were women. They were all actually in a deep state of trauma and grief. They were too bewildered and confused to even understand the instruction of the angels that Jesus was asking them to return to Galilee and to meet him there. What did they do? They huddled together like scared dogs in Jerusalem, licking their wounds. And Jesus had to break into that upper room to be able to get them out and to liberate them from their collective fear. Remember, they had promised to stick it out with Jesus. Peter even swore that he was ready to die for Jesus. But where were they when Jesus was arrested and crucified? I am therefore not surprised that one of the traditional hymns that we sing on the stations of the cross, at the stations of the cross, on Good Friday, is a question that says, "Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there?" And then it says, "Oh, oh, oh, oh." Sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? I don't know, but honestly, I get a bit amused when I sing that song because it is rubbing it in. Nanunumbat, nangungonsensya, as they would say in Tagalog. But I don't think Jesus would ever do that to us. I don't think Jesus would make us wallow in our guilt and hang ourselves like Judas Iscariot did. In today's gospel, we have the reversal of the denial scene, which happened at sundown. Now this one is happening at sunrise. I use my imagination, and I am inclined to believe that there must have been also a rooster crowing, not to announce the coming of darkness, but to welcome the breaking of the dawn at the Sea of Tiberias. Take note, there is also a bonfire here. By the way, a bonfire to remind us of that infamous bonfire where Peter was warming his hands when a servant girl approached him and asked him 3 times if he was not one of the disciples of that man from Nazareth who had just been arrested. John has a very interesting way of intensifying the drama of this Easter encounter of Jesus with Peter. I call it a different kind of salubong, a similar scene that would lead to the removal of the black veil that has been covering the heart and soul of Peter since the crucifixion of Jesus. But first, Peter had to answer the question, "Do you love me?" He had to answer it not once, but 3 times. Enough to be able to bring back to Peter's memory the 3 times that he said, "I do not know him." It is Jesus' way of raising him back from the dead by inviting him to say one word of love for every word of denial. I call it something like a renewal of vows. You know, John tells us Peter was grieved after Jesus asked him for the 3rd time, "Do you love me?" He was grieved. The original word in Greek is elupethe. And the other versions of the Bible translate it differently. I saw one version that had, "Peter was distressed." Another one said, "Peter was saddened." And still another one said, "Peter was deeply hurt." I do not think it was because he felt that the Lord was doubting him. I think Peter was doubting himself all over again. I imagine that he was already in tears when he answered the 3rd question. I imagine him weeping and saying, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." I tried to read his heart, and I have a feeling that what Peter wanted to say was, "Lord, you know well how weak and how consistently inconsistent I have always been since the day when we first met. Didn't I fall on my knees when you filled up my boat the first time? And I said to you, 'Leave me, Lord, depart from me. I am a sinful man.' And then you showed up again by the shore and filled my boat a 2nd time. And John said, 'It was you.' Didn't I jump into the water to hide my face from you in shame? I have told you, Lord, over and over again, I am not worthy. I am not qualified. I am not the man you're looking for. I am weak. But I can only say I love you in spite of myself." If I were to give this passage a title, I would call it The Resurrection of Peter. He had to learn to be a lamb before he could grow into a shepherd. He had to allow himself to be fed by Jesus before he could feed his flock. And before he could lead the church, he had to learn to die to himself and to allow Jesus to lead him by the hand. I want to tell you one little secret. All of us bishops and priests, and I am sure including Pope Francis himself, you know, we draw a lot of consolation from this gospel passage. Sometimes, like Peter, we are also tempted to despair about ourselves when we are confronted by our own weaknesses. Remember St. Paul asking the Lord to get rid of his weakness? Remember him suggesting to God, please remove my thorn in the flesh, only to be told by Jesus, my grace is enough for you. For in weakness, power reaches perfection. It is when I am weak that I am strong. I hope you see why this passage is consoling for us. Because it assures us that with Jesus, even if our commitments are breakable, they are also renewable. He just wants us to make sure that if we go on with our mission to feed His lambs, it is for no other reason than for love of the shepherd to whom the flock belongs.